Good evening, my friends. Hey, it's time for the Orphan Queen live discussion group. Joining me is the infamous and delightful Chad Reed. He was with us last time. If you did not watch the read through and discussion on Esther's chapter 1 and 2, you can always go back and do that. But if you're even slightly familiar with the story of Esther in the Bible, then you'll enjoy your time with us regardless of whether you did before or not. I'm going to have prayer here in a second. Chad and I want to ask God's guidance as we read through and study because it's going to get wild. No, just because that's what we like to do. But I do want to thank Christy GL who just subscribed. And I also want to let you know that if you would like to study Esther along with us, I did create, I'm a moderately creative person, some study guide printables that will kind of help you know what questions to ask as you read through the chapters. So please email me. My Gmail account for Ask a Christian is askachristianfriend@gmail.com, and just ask for the study guide printables. And with that, let's have prayer for ourselves, our study, our nation. Just join us for a moment. Creator God, we pause to thank you for making us creatures of reason, for creating in our hearts space for compassion. And as we think about all the things that are going on in our nation and our local communities, and even here, just had an earthquake earlier this morning, not a big one, but enough of one to remind us that the world is changing and shifting very literally and figuratively every day. And God, I just want to rest my cares and my burdens on you so you can free me up to do good things with my time here on earth. Bless us today as we get into Esther chapters 3 and 4, and let us see some cool stuff about your people. Amen. Hey, if you're just joining us, welcome. I'm super excited about chapters 3 and 4, even more than 1 and 2. I want to thank you if you joined us last time. Thank you for joining us again. We would love to have, hey, either your cat's going crazy or perhaps your wife. Do you hear it?
Oh, it sounded kind of like your audio went underwater for a bit, but that's all.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
Well, anyway, we are excited to have your comments as well. So if you're just joining us, please, as we read through, if you have questions, if you want to say something, if you just have a funny comment, all that's welcome. And to those who will watch this later and continually ask me if I want to be your friend, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means to be your YouTube friend. So you'll have to explain yourself. Chad, they're trying to get me to subscribe to their channel. All right. So last time we read through, and we'll do that again. Chad, jump in, interject, stop me if you have something fun to say, and I would love for you to show off the book that you were digging into before we get started. So,
okay. Many moons ago, I borrowed a Josephus book from a friend, and
you didn't give it back?
When they ask for it back, I'll give it back.
Okay.
I was hoping to help myself understand some more about the Bible. And then I just never looked into it as much as I probably should have. But he's a Jewish historian. He's got his own, I don't know what his sources are, but a lot of people, theologians and stuff, will reference him for certain Bible stories. And he didn't have a whole lot to say, but there are a few things where he gives a little bit of flavor to the story, because reading through the chapters today was, I don't know, I was kind of confused because it doesn't feel real. Like it feels like a play or a drama or Shakespeare. Like it feels like the villain is a little too villainy.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah.
almost a Snidely Whiplash kind of a guy. And
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I had to do a little extra research. You're like, but why? Okay, cool. Yeah, so one of the reasons why Josephus is a big deal is because he is a Jewish historian born into a priestly family. That theologians love him because he's not particularly sympathetic to Christianity. So that makes his testimony a little bit more authentic or real than if, somebody was a Christian. And then the other one that we love to like dig into was Herodotus. I don't know how to say his name, but he kind of gets the Greek pagan side of things. So it is really cool to hear him talk about Jewish background, Jewish law, and just for the sake of anyone watching, Jewish and Hebrew are very interchangeable. In fact, Jewish came out of the word Hebrew. They would say, the Hebrews. Use was short for Hebrews, and that changed to Jews. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there in case people are thinking like, how is the Hebrew nation and this word Jewish connected? Because they weren't actually called Jewish in these Bible times. It was later that we got there. Okay, so you're going to have maybe a couple comments from Josephus later?
Yeah, I have maybe two that I thought were really good.
Okay, I'm excited. I haven't dug into that at all. All right, so if you've got your Bible or an online Bible, please turn to Esther chapter 3. I'm going to read through that. If you don't know where Esther is, it's a small book, so it's kind of hard to find, but I get there by turning to like the middle of the Bible, which is almost always Psalms or Proverbs, and then you kind of go back just about that far. So hopefully that's helpful. If you're hitting Job and Nehemiah, you are right around there. This is the Message paraphrase. It's fun reading. And then what translation do you have, Chad? NIV?
I have NIV. Yep.
Okay. So any translation, you can read along with us. If you notice discrepancies in the text, just ask. All right, here we go. Chapter 3. Oh, should I do a recap?
Sure. Previously in Esther.
Yeah, previously in Esther. Esther, or in Hebrew, Hadassah, an orphan, gets taken in by her uncle Mordecai. Mordecai works in the court. The king Xerxes at the time has taken the crown from his queen Vashti because she refused to dance in front of his dude party. And so she's banished, never to be seen again. But he's looking for a new girl to love. He holds a beauty contest. It just so happens that Esther is chosen. So now Esther, a Hebrew, is the favored woman of Xerxes, this really all-powerful at the time Persian king. This was world power, Persia. All right. And then at the end of chapter 2, there's a little aside where Mordecai discovers, because of his position, that there is a plot to murder the king. He reports it to Esther. It's found to be true. And so Mordecai is held in esteem but forgotten.
And Esther is keeping her heritage secret.
Yes. Thank you. Good. All right. Chapter 3. Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of, I don't know how to say these things, I make them up, but Hammedatha, the Agagite, that's a hard word too, making him the highest ranking official in the government. All the king's servants at the king's gate used to honor him by bowing down and kneeling before Haman. That's what the king had commanded. All right. I know it seems too soon to pause, but I want to share my screen because there's a lot of action that takes place around this King's Gate, and I want to give you a visual. So let me see if I can take us there. Just so you can see, I'll show you. This is what it looks like now. And then I want to show you kind of what the rendering, what it looked like. So the King's Gate was always like a little guard house through a major entryway. And in this case, if you go to this PersianThings.com, there's a whole bunch of information on the King's Gate. And I think that you'll really enjoy seeing that and reading more about it. But the King's Gate is where all kinds of business was conducted. If you wanted to get the king's attention, if you wanted a case heard, if you wanted, help for your part of the neighborhood or your part of the kingdom, you'd go there and wait at the King's Gate. And there are benches there. And apparently this was such a well-kept, well-organized area that people would come state their name, their business, and they would even put in a short description of what they were wearing. So there's some crazy record keeping that was going on at this King's Gate. So I just wanted you to have that in your mind as we see things that are happening in the King's Gate. And it's phenomenal because the part that you saw still surviving today, it gives us a really good view of how ornate the kingdom was and what kind of power and wealth they had. The King's Gate, Xerxes added to what his father had done, making it more ornate, building it up. So anyway, I just thought that was cool. So that is where a lot of the story takes place. All right, starting in verses 2. Except Mordecai. Mordecai wouldn't do it, would not bow down and kneel. The king's servants at the King's Gate asked Mordecai about it. Why do you cross the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him about this, and he wouldn't listen. So they went to Haman to see whether something shouldn't be done about it. Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw for himself that Mordecai didn't bow down and kneel before him, he was outraged. Meanwhile, having learned that Mordecai was a Jew, Haman hated to waste his fury on just one Jew. He looked for a way to eliminate not just Mordecai, but all Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Chad, is this the part where it starts like a little over the top?
Yes, this is definitely
on just one Jew.
This is the part where it gets a little crazy. And every time I looked something up, it got weirder. So according to some things I read on Wikipedia, which I don't know, who knows? It's good enough for high school English, so it's good enough for this, I guess. In certain legends and lore, Haman goes from just having extreme prejudice against the Jews, and Mordecai won't kneel down to him either because he doesn't want to give glory to a person, or just because of the hatred that Mordecai has for Agagites and Amalekites, or if you really dial up the Disney villain, some people think that Haman had images, like graven images, like woven into his robe. So like around the bottom of his robe were idols. So if Mordecai bowed, not only was he bowing to Haman, but he was also bowing to Amalekite gods, because Haman was just that weird.
Wow.
It's all over the map. It's like where this guy's at. But I think a clue, at least how my Bible read, and I think how yours was there is some prejudice between these two groups of people, because he doesn't care. It's not like he's like, I'm going to kill Mordecai and all of his people. it's only after he learns that Mordecai's a Jew, it's like, well, of course this guy's disrespecting me. It's because he's a Jew and I want the Jews gone. So it's like it doesn't sink in until after he knows what nationality they are, as to where his hatred lies.
Yeah, I was doing some of the same research, which is one of the reasons I got pretty pumped up about this tonight. But why does the Bible say that Haman is an Agagite? Agagite. I hate this word already. This is a super important detail. So I'm going to go with that portion of the reasoning here and why it's in the Bible. So some background and history that might add flair and color and understanding to that is that King Agag was the king of the Amalekites. And if you go back in Hebrew history, Saul was supposed to take this guy out. And Saul, in a weird fashion, was merciful on people that he shouldn't be merciful and tough on people that he shouldn't be tough on. This guy was not following what God had asked him to do. And there was already huge, warfare between the Amalekites and Israel. And there are traditions that say the Amalekites, whenever they took Israel Hebrew captives, they would not just hurt them, but mock their circumcision, torture them. And so there was some really bad blood here. This, is partially in the Bible and partially extra biblical, but it's almost like the storyteller, which we talked about last week. We don't 100% know. It could have been Mordecai himself, but it seems more likely that it's somebody after him, maybe someone close to him. But it's almost like it is a setup for this plot. Like any Hebrew reading Haman, the son of the Agagite, would just automatically, because you know that history. We don't know it as modern Bible readers, but there seems to be just a ton of bad blood. And if we have time today, which I'm kind of guessing we won't, but I'll just mention it briefly. There are some really fascinating Jewish tradition surrounding prophecies in the book of Esther, prophecies about World War II and Hitler. Did you come across this? And Hitler being a descendant, the Germans being descendants of the Amalekites.
I did not come across that, but Haman being the descendant. So the Agagites were Amalekites, which the first time they show up in the Bible was the Jews are leaving, the Israelites are leaving Egypt, and they're trying to go through Amalekite country, and the Amalekites are like, no way, buzz off.
Mm-hmm.
So they get routed around, and then several hundred years later, God says to the king of Israel, hey, go back, those people are really mean and they shouldn't exist anymore. Get rid of them. And then the king of the Israelites doesn't follow through on that 100%. He goes like 99% of the way, but obviously spared a few people, spared like the really nice looking cows, spared the king for a minute.
I'm gonna close my window real quick. It's getting bright.
And so I didn't come across the history that Hitler was a descendant, but Haman being a descendant of those people and all of the craziness that he's about to cause, trying to annihilate an entire nation, I thought of the age-old philosophy question, which is like, if you could go back in time to kill Hitler, would you, to like stop World War II? So it's kind of like, if the Israelites could go back in time and do the thing they were supposed to do, would they have been in this situation at all?
Yeah. Oh, well, we're not going to answer that exactly right now, but at the end of chapter 3, I do have a question surrounding this genocide idea and a little bit more about Hitler. But let's pause that for now. That's fun and funny. And if you want to chime in on what you think about that, if you want to comment, feel free. By the way, I do want to say that I don't think there's any proof, hard proof of this Germans being related to the Amalekites. I don't know if there's any hard proof, but there's definitely tradition and stories going back a long time, but there's several missing links. So don't get too carried away on this conspiracy. All right, let's pick up. Oh, another question I had was like you're saying, total Disney villain. Like this guy's just like honing in on this. And my question was, why is this man willing to start a huge campaign? Because we talked about last week, there's probably about 100,000 Hebrews, 100,000 Hebrews in the area, or at least in this nation right now. About 40 to 50,000 have returned home, but that's a ton of people to be mad at. That's a ton of people to want to get rid of. So why is this so personal? Why would a war or a campaign be waged just because somebody didn't bow down? I cannot rightly answer that. However, I do know that many wars are way more personal than we would think. You know, some Helen of Troy, that was a real story. That was real personal. You know, somebody just doesn't like somebody else, and then you find any excuse to try to get resources or whatever. Anyway,
I also thought it was interesting that Haman's not Persian,
right?
So it's one minority fighting against another minority in that time. I mean, he doesn't have any. I mean, I don't know what he did that the king honored him like he did, but he's like second in the kingdom, and he's not a Persian.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of a cool thing about the Persians. One thing that I really appreciate is that they when they conquered, they took the best and the brightest, and then they trained them, but they also put them at the heads of state. So it's sort of like become like us, and then we won't discriminate. So it's kind of a neat thing. Hey, Cease Beaston. I don't know why you're saying Haman, but Cease Beaston saying Haman. Yes, Haman. All right, so we're not getting very far very fast. So let me do a few more verses. In the first month, the month of Nisan, the 12th year of Xerxes, the pur, or pur, that is the lot, was cast under Haman's charge to determine the propitious day and month. The lot turned up the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Now, this doesn't go into very much detail. Maybe another version of the Bible is better. But what he's doing is casting lots, taking a roll of the die to see what day he should take his fury out on the Jews. Again, it seems a little Disney villain. It's just like, well, why don't you just pick a day where you can get your troops together? Why do we have to cast lots? I don't know. Maybe that's more normal.
More Wikipedia lore, so with a grain of salt. But there's a legend that when he was rolling the dice, he kept coming up with months that were lucky to the Jews. So like there was like, it was, you know, he would come up with December. In our time, he would come up with December, like, well, we can't do that, that's Christmas. So he would roll a certain month and it would be like, well, that's Passover. And you roll another month and, well, that's the Feast of Trumpets. And roll another month, like, no, they like that one too. And then finally he rolled this one. He's like, all right, this will work. That does nothing lucky in that month.
So that's just some tradition from lore, or was there any backup?
Something on Wikipedia says that that's like a some Jewish knowledge. I don't know exactly where it comes from.
All right, so we'll have to do our own research on that.
Yeah.
We're still out. Haman then spoke with King Xerxes. I love this. I love the words here. It says, there is an odd set of people. There's an odd set of people scattered throughout the provinces of your kingdom who don't fit in. Their customs and ways are different from those of everybody else. Worse. Hey, don't you guys love live streams? Their customs and ways are different from those of everybody else. Worse, they disregard the king's laws. They're an affront. The king shouldn't put up with them. If it pleases the king, let orders be given that they be destroyed. I'll pay for it myself. I'll deposit 375 tons of silver in the royal bank to finance the operation.
There's nothing my cat hates more than me being on the phone. So
Hey,
I think he's fine now.
You should probably tell people your cat's name just so they can feel like, oh, I know.
That's Biscuit. And yeah, every conference call I've been on today working from home, he acts up.
Biscuit just wants attention. All right, so I love Haman's speech here because it's so dirty. Like, yeah, there is an odd set of people. He doesn't oversell it. He just, they're kind of odd. They don't fit in. Their customs and ways are different from those of everybody else. Oh, yeah, well, how often have you seen people who should appreciate diversity kind of turn on certain groups? This feels applicable for the times that we're living in as well. And he says, worse, they disregard the king's laws. Now, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but I do know one thing he's talking about, which is that Mordecai is not bowing down to him and the king said to do it.
Yeah, it's a classic exaggeration. It's like they're disrespecting you, they're disrespecting your household, they're disrespecting me and you at the same time.
Yeah, it's so minute that if the king had like half a brain cell to say, tell me more about that, I wonder if he would have been like, And this reminds me, this calls back the story of Daniel in the book of Daniel, where the villains in that story were trying to get Daniel tossed into this pit full of hungry lions as one of their penalties. And they are saying, King, you've made a decree where everyone is supposed to petition nobody but the king. The king is basically God on earth. But this man, Daniel, he is petitioning a different God. So see, we need to throw him in this pit of lions. This guy's in a very similar spot where he says, King, 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 the Jews are just not listening to your laws. And really, it's so much smaller and pettier than that. Anyway, also, if somebody came to you and said, I'd like to go to war on a certain people group, and I'm going to pay for it myself. I'm going to deposit all the funds we need to do this myself. Would you have any distrust for this situation? Just seems to be a huge red flag.
So this is one of the things that Josephus comments on, although he disagrees on the amount that was offered. So the Bible says 10,000 talents, and Josephus says it's 40,000 talents. But basically, his pitch is there's a lot of these people, and I think that they're so dangerous to the country that I am willing to, like, if we were to just get rid of them, we would lose all of this tax revenue and tribute revenue from them, like being here and paying and giving us what they farm off of their land. So I'm going to front the cost of them. I am so focused on the good of the country that I will pay out of my pocket to have these people gone, because otherwise you might suffer in the amount of money in your royal bank because these people are gone.
Yeah. Okay, that's very helpful. Another thing to add to that is knowing where we are historically. We talked about last week, Xerxes has just gone to war against the Greeks and lost miserably, even though he had way more troops. He should have been able to conquer, um, and he got his butt handed to him real badly. So taxes are depleted because of that. He goes back, he licks his wounds for a couple of years, and while he does that, he focuses on internal building projects. One of them, being improving the King's Gate. And so he's putting a lot of money into like city and infrastructure, probably as a little bit of self-soothing from the lost war. And I bet this guy really needs the money. Like, I think that there was a financial decision, and we don't know if there was a little outside talk, but we'll find out later that the orders to exterminate the Hebrews involved going ahead to plunder. And I can't imagine that that wasn't part of the discussion. But not only will I pay for this, but there may be some kickbacks, and we take these um, some of these wealthier people down or whatever. So we can only speculate. That's extra biblical, but I'm imagining that that's the case. Let me kind of push through here for a little bit. Verse 10, the author kind of shows his colors. He says, the king slipped his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, arch enemy of the Jews. He went from just some guy to arch enemy of the Jews. Go ahead, the king said to Haman. It's your money. Do whatever you want with those people. The king's secretaries were brought in on the 13th day of the first month. The orders were written out word for word as Haman had addressed them to the king's satraps, which are the governors of every province and the officials of every people. They were written in the script of each province and the language of each people in the name of Xerxes and sealed with the royal signet. Bulletins were sent out by couriers to all the king's provinces with orders to massacre, kill, and eliminate all the Jews, youngsters and old men, women and babies, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar, and, here it is, to plunder their goods. Copies of the bulletin were ready to be posted in each province, publicly available to all peoples to get them ready for that day. At the king's command, the couriers took off. The order was also posted in the palace complex of Susa. The king and Haman sat back and had a drink while the city of Susa reeled from the news. Wild. Inconceivable.
So Josephus writes what he found, what he believed the letter to have contained. And I don't know what his sources are, but it's awesome. Well, at least I think it's awesome because you can see the evil guy flair in the decree. So this is the content of the decree. Artaxerxes, the great king, to the rulers of the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, sends this writing. Whereas I have governed many nations and obtained dominions of all the habitable earth, according to my desire, and have not been obliged to do anything that is insolent or cruel to my subjects by my such power, but have shown myself to be mild and gentle by taking care of the peace and good order, and have sought how they might enjoy those blessings for all time to come. And whereas I have been kindly informed by Haman, who, on account of his prudence and justice, is the first in my esteem and in dignity, the only second to myself for his fidelity and constant goodwill to me, that there is an ill-natured nation intermixed with all mankind, that is averse to our laws and not subject to the kings, and of a different conduct of life from others, that hateth the monarchy and of a disposition that is pernicious to our affairs. I give order that these men, of whom Haman, our second father, hath informed us, be destroyed by their wives and children, with their wives and children, and that none of them be spared, none for pity. And then it goes on and on. But I just wanted to highlight, like, the king who's great, and Haman who's also really great and just and kind and merciful and benevolent and great.
Yeah. Wants these people dead. Now, that did kind of give me a little bit of insight because it sounds more like, they're taking the insurrection angle. Like, maybe they did talk more about the laws, and that's a message to Christians. That's a message to God's people in any denomination, in any religion. Like, when you are trying to follow God, it probably does look to many leaders in many nations like you are disregarding their laws, and you do look different and you do stand out. Like, this is something that Christians in other countries, have a lot of right to talk about, and maybe a little bit less here, but we can stand out like a sore thumb. And I do wonder what other laws, because of their convictions, they were unable to keep. And I wonder how much, like, Haman probably didn't lie much. So the time that he did, or the time that he exaggerated, he probably got away with it a lot easier. It's like, that's why you don't lie, so that when you do lie, people believe you.
That's what I've always said.
Yeah, you've got a handful of good ones in your life, so use them sparingly, kids. You know what I'm saying? All right. Anything else, Chad, on that?
That's all I have for that chapter. Although I do think it's interesting, that last sentence. The king and Haman sat down to drink and party while the rest of the city and country probably was freaking out over this order.
Right.
So like the king wasn't really sure what the impact of his thing was. He's just trusting Haman to run things.
Yeah. Felicia says, good logic there. Haha. Yeah, he's just trusting Haman. That is funny commentary. This is where I was going to say, like, for discussion's sake, especially if you're doing this at home, or, you want to look at this book with somebody and take a little bit more time, we could compare and contrast the plans for this genocide here with Hitler's plans. And there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of differences. This seems to happen overnight, but the political climate must have been anti-Semitic enough, because we don't hear anybody else standing up for them. It's anti-Semitic enough, or it's a low enough number in the overall population that nobody actually knows a Jew, or nobody cares about a Jew, or they've been so insular that nobody likes a Jew. I cannot imagine any time in Earth's history not standing up for your friends and neighbors. I can imagine keeping silent when you don't know anybody or you don't like anybody. But that's what I'm wondering. What was the overall view of the Jewish people? Were they living up to their God-given potential? Were they even being kind, or were they just, you know what I mean? So, or are we just not privy to that part of the story? And then some other history that I said I was going to mention briefly is that Hitler did know this story. Hitler hated this story, as you can imagine. And he actually banned the reading of the book of Esther in 1941. He banned the reading of the book of Esther, and he closed down synagogues during Purim to make sure people weren't reading the story. And he hated it because the guy who's going against the Jews, spoiler alert, doesn't do real well in the end, which we'll get to. So another fun historical nugget. Chad, would you read us chapter 4?
Sure. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hagtat, Hackthach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. The order of that seems so backwards to me. Like, why would you try to change what he was wearing first and then ask what's wrong? It's almost like it's just a weird way of saying, hey, cheer up, it's not that bad. Oh, I guess it is that bad. Okay, what is it? Or maybe it's because he's not allowed through the king's gate in those clothes. She's hoping that if he puts on different clothes, then he can come a little closer and say what's up.
Yeah, that's how I take it. But I'm glad you brought that up, because my friend, Pastor Mark, who is the associate pastor of the church I attend, did a sermon focusing on just this part and how easy it would have been for Mordecai to take the change of clothes, wipe the ashes off, go into a place of privilege, tell Esther his story. But he didn't do that. And he would rather stay weeping in his clothes that he wasn't allowed in the palace on than ensure exact communication to Esther. And she had to rely on this guy who sounds like a throat clearing, Hathach, or whatever it is, to properly relay this message. A couple of things come to mind here. One is that Esther is really, really close with her servants and really, really trusting. And especially if she's trying to keep her identity, secret-ish. Although if somebody knows she's related to him, I can't imagine it's very secret. But if there's anti-Semitic, I can't say that word. If there's anti-Semitic sentiments already, there's a lot of trust going on here with her servants and royal eunuchs and all that. And then I am super impressed with Mordecai because he could have entered into privilege. He could have cleaned himself up and probably gained even more of an audience. But this guy's a soldier. He's staying in the field with the troops. He's not changing into finery. He is sending the clothes back and saying, like, not even for a second am I going to lose sight of what my people are going through. Not even for a second am I changing out of this lament gear. I like
There's also, so the next verse is, throat clearing goes out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And so there's got to be this interesting image in public, because you're not going behind the king's gate, you're now in public, where this guy who is very sad at the king's decree is now getting the ear of someone who's obviously from the royal palace, and people might not be sure who he is, but obviously he's probably wearing like the bellboy hotel uniform. Like someone has come out of the hotel and is like, sir, what is the problem? Which is completely backwards to how it implies that it was back then. King makes decree's fine, decree's always going to be fine, no take backsies ever.
Yeah. Well, keep reading there. I think we have tons more data to mine here.
So Hackthach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. The things that I find puzzling here are, why does it matter what the amount of money was? Because the king said, doesn't matter, I don't want your money. So it seems like a weird detail to include. And then he gave him a copy of the text to go send to Esther, which it seems like a weird question, but could Esther read?
Okay. Good point.
I
would
was
imagine.
just thinking about that.
Like I can't imagine that he raised her up like as such a highly religious man, such a man committed to, especially if what we're talking about is not to bow down to man or any graven images, and that was his big thing with Haman, then we're looking at a guy who is really committed to tradition and the ways of his people, which included reading scriptures regularly. And as she was brought up in his house, it seems more likely that she could than she couldn't. Plus, what's she doing with all of her time in the palace?
I'm not sure. I mean, Esther 1 and 2 implies that she's just sitting around getting beauty treatments. It's a good point that she would need to read the Bible and have worship and stuff. Otherwise, all I can see is her reading like the ingredients list on her various like cosmetics.
Burnt charcoal. Yep. Massage that myrrh harder. No, I don't know. Let's do some research on that. That's a good question for next time. Could Esther read? Something else you said stuck out, but I'll get back to it.
Hatfatch went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all of the king's officials and people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned by the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. Josephus says that so the king had made this law that no one approach him, and there were a bunch of people standing around the king with big axes in case anybody broke that law. So when I read that, I immediately thought that, I mean, this law was most likely put into place to stop spies, but the image I had in my head was the king being kind of a stereotypical bad Sunday morning comic where he like starts his day in the throne room in a bathrobe and bunny slippers with his live, laugh, love mug. He's like, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee. And like one day someone walked in on him when he was mid-sip and he's like, all right, that's it. There's a rule. If anyone comes in here again, they're getting their head cut off. I decide when I start my day.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm sure like just because you have the power, that's probably why you exercise it, because he can. Also, there's billions of plots. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but there's hundreds of plots to take down this guy, I'm sure. And so having his bodyguards there, makes people think twice before they send their deranged cousin, Sue in to ask for something or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right. Probably part of it was just he didn't want to be annoyed with petty details. Just wants to have his peace and quiet to think and make royal decrees. So yeah, that's pretty serious. I can't imagine being married and not seeing my spouse for 30 days. Like, what's he doing? What's he doing that he doesn't want to see Esther, whom the last chapter said he loved more than anybody? She got his attention more than anyone. Like, he liked her. He's being celibate for a month or has to visit the other girls, or I just don't know.
Yeah, 30 days seems like quite a long time.
Yeah, to not even have public appearances together. Really, what's he doing? I don't know. All right, keep trucking.
When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all of the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. And then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go and gather together all of the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. And do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my maids will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
Wow. All right, that's the end of chapter 4, people. So now it's time for your questions and comments. This Mordecai is a straight thug, and I mean that in the most respectful way. Like, I feel this guy's passion. I firmly believe that if he was in a position to do, I don't think he's counseling Esther to do something he wouldn't do, is what I'm trying to say. I think, like, he is serious. He understands the implications. By the way, people, like, the whole reason that Christians believe that the Jewish nation was under attack is because this is the lineage, this is the line through which Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, will be born. If we wipe these people out, then all the prophecies about how Messiah comes, they're not. So God has to save this people to write his own story. So how is he going to do that? Like, this is Mordecai. This is Mordecai speaking the truth prophetically. He says, look, Esther, if you're not going to stand up for your people, we will be delivered through another way. There has to be a way that some of us are surviving. Maybe it's just the 50,000 that went back to Jerusalem, but deliverance is going to come from somewhere. And maybe you were born for this time, which is such a chilling and beautiful, like chilling, like chill bumps, chilling and beautiful idea that we can apply to ourselves in our own situation.
Well, it would be, except his motivational speech is all over the map. So yeah, when I think of this story, I think about Esther, the brave woman who was put in the right spot at the right time by God for a good purpose. But Mordecai's motivational speech is, to me, less than motivating, because he's saying, if you don't do this, somebody else will. You'll probably be punished and die. And maybe God has put you in this spot for the right time, but also you're not the only one that could do this. God could pick somebody else, and then you'll face the consequences. And it just sounds very threatening. To which I'm more confused, because Esther goes, okay, yeah, you're right. I should go do this, but I'm going to need a lot of moral support even though I might die if I don't.
Okay, what do you guys think at home? Is this motivating to you, or is this confusing to you? Because it is a little bit all over the map, because I think they're thinking out every possible scenario and ending at the point where, look, all right, you're right, I got to do it. Like, I don't know what it's going to be for my story, but I have to be part of the story. Like, I have to try. And so I love it and I respect it. And I do wonder how much time goes down between that speech and then when Esther sends her answer back. I mean, it sounds immediate, but was it an hour? Was it a couple hours of prayer herself? But she does. She comes up with this plan, which I love. I see that we're getting close to our hour mark. But she sends her answer back, and she does ask for huge amounts of moral support. Get all the Jews together, probably not in one area, but get all the Jews together, fast and pray. And then if you will do this, I'm not doing it alone, but if you will do this, then I'll go to the king. And then if I die, I die. You're right. It's like, but what it made me think of is how earnest this woman was about seeking the will of God and the good of her people. And what I was left questioning is, here's my application for today. And by the way, we've talked a little bit about how this story doesn't ever mention God's name or anything like that, but it does talk about spiritual disciplines here. So we know that she is connected with God. She's going to fast and pray. If you're not connected with God, I don't know people who do a lot of fasting, maybe intermittent fasting for health reasons, but for 3 days, I don't know anybody who's not connected with God who goes 3 days just for kicks. This woman is serious. She's asking for help. She's seeking God. And here is my question for myself, my friends. There's some serious stuff going on in our nation right now. How much better prepared would we be to show up if we did some fasting and praying before we did some protesting? Like, I love it. I love how they're coming clear-minded. I love how they're coming unified. That spoke to me today. Chad, final thoughts. We have about 5 minutes before closing up. What did we not get enough of? Or what is, what are you saying about God or humanity or yourself today?
Like I said, when I've been reading this this time through, it's been a little bit challenging because it seems like it's written like a play. It seems like some people were made to be a little bit more righteous than maybe they were, and some people were made to be a little bit more evil than they were, to make it
so you can boo and hiss when the characters come on
exactly
stage.
Yeah, so like, you know, when they come on, it's been Broadwayized, so that you know, like, oh yeah, that guy's clearly a villain, he's wearing a black trench coat. But regardless, I of what's true and what's, like, we do know that God delivered the Israelites from a tricky situation, and so that much is true, and that has, you know, there's a holiday about it, and it's been kept to this day. So we know that that's true, and we know that this is a really great story about how God can use anyone in any situation. Someone from a beauty contest, someone like Mordecai who is walking up to the king's palace, which is supposed to be this place of prosperity and happiness and fairness, and from Haman's decree, like this great, fantastic king, like, and he's walking into that square. I would assume that'd be like the National Mall for us today, or like the White House steps, and he's just wearing his sadness garb, his ashes and sackcloth, saying, like, there is a great, terrible thing going on right now. I know that everything that the king says is supposedly great, but he has just said something that is awful, and it's really going to impact a lot of people. And I'm here to let people know that that's wrong, even though it's kind of embarrassing nationally.
Yeah, there's something to say about public demonstration and especially public grieving, right? Public anger doesn't really do a lot for me. Maybe it does for some people. Like, public outrage does not win my heart to a cause, but public grieving does. I don't know why, but if I had seen that, I love that you mentioned him, you know, in this kind of spectacle, coming to a place where people usually meet, where they, you know, are most likely rational, bringing their cases before the king and the, you know, the king's representatives, and then whatever the ancient Persian version of a yoga mat is, you know, that goat hair sackcloth, unrolling it. I see him, you know, prostrate. He's wearing the same thing he's laying on, weeping, ashes mixed with tears. Like, you gave me that image that I didn't think of before. That would stop me. People, you know, fists in the air, yelling, I just want to get out of there. But seeing a kind looking older gent who maybe I recognize because he's from the kingdom, like he works there. Maybe I even recognize him. Yeah, now I want to know what's wrong. And that's a good message. That's a good little personal takeaway. Certainly not the theme of this, but I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. Well, I think it was Boys to Men who said, we've come to the end of the road. Still, I can't let go. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
You and Biscuit, you and Biscuit next week.
Yeah. Well, I was going to pick him up, but he ran away.
All right. Thank you so much, Chad, for joining in this discussion. Now, those of you who have been watching at home, I know you have fun things to say. I see you, Felicia Beeston. I see you, Amos Moses. I see you, Cease, and I see those of you who didn't speak up today, but we'd love to have you. And in fact, if you're commenting along with us and you're studying along, you've got something fun to say, let me know, because I can send you an invite. You can join me and chat up here. It's something I've been wanting to experiment with a little bit. But thank you again for doing Esther chapters 3 and 4 with us. We'll do 5 and 6 next week, same time, same place. Please check out the YouTube or Facebook page and hit the star or the bell so that you can get notified when we go live. That's it for me. I'll be doing more Q&A this week and next week. So if you've got questions, you want to hear Christian worldview, point of view, send them in to me at our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/askachristianfriend, or you can email me at askachristianfriend@gmail.com. Once again, thank you to Chad Reed for joining me, and if he is able, we would love to have you back next week, Chad.
I would love to be back. Well, I'm pretty sure I can make it.
All right, sweet. I'll see you then, and I'll talk to you a little before then. And for now, that's it, everybody. Bye.